Good morning.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Can you all hear me? All right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, perfect. So we're just at time. We're excited to bring you Harnessing the Market for the Benefit of All, Increasing Transparency and Other Emerging Possibilities for Ebook Accessibility. So there's 4 of us on this panel, and you're going to hear, I think, a diverse range of perspectives coming from different industry partners, publishers, and from me, one of the librarians. So we're excited to bring this to you. My name is Trisha Prevett. I'm an e-learning librarian at Southern New Hampshire University, and I'll have my co-panelists introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Masher. I'm a product owner for EBSCO eBooks.
I'm Susan Doerr. I'm the Associate Director at the University of Minnesota Press.
Michael Johnson, I'm the Director of Content Partnerships at Benetech, which is a charity in this area. Not in this geographic area, in the area of accessibility. Oh, and I'm going first. All right, I think I missed a call when I got assigned the role of being in charge of the whole ecosystem workflow, so we'll see how that goes. First, before we get started, just a quick poll. How many in the group are librarians? Okay, how many are from the publishing community? Okay, then any digital platforms or system kind of folks? Are there any others? Which is a bad poll category. Okay. Thank you. Before I get started, I want to point out that everything that all of us are going to say would almost also pertain to materials that are open access or OER, because open access is great, OER is great, but you still need to address the accessibility issues. So that was something we wanted to make sure everybody understood. Okay, so I have 2 slides and a quick video. What I'm demonstrating here is if you can picture an egg on a spoon, and I'm trying to get the egg on the spoon, it's a raw egg, all the way to where it needs to go. And along the way, all of these people and processes and systems, we have to do a handoff. And anywhere along the way, if the egg falls off the spoon and breaks, then all the other work is for naught. So it's very important that we all understand a tremendous amount has to happen so that when a reader finds, selects, and downloads a title and goes to read it, that miracle can happen. So we start with the author. We have a publisher who will speak to this in great detail. So the author submits a manuscript, we go through the revision cycle with the publisher. That all gets completed, and then we go to the ebook conversion cycle. We're talking about ebook 3 here. And out of that process comes an accessible ebook 3, accessible ready ebook 3 file, and then that goes into a digital warehouse. The digital warehouse may be within the control of the publishing house, maybe they use an outsourced vendor like FileSource or somebody like that. But the files, the accessible files are stored in a digital warehouse. From there, they get distributed into the sales channel and the discovery platforms. So if an individual finds it, they buy it. It's straightforward. If you went to wherever it is you buy your textbooks at college or whatever, there's an accessible file. Put it in your shopping cart, you buy it, you do a download, there's an offline reader, and if everybody did everything fine, and the egg makes it to the end, we have a happy reader. In a little bit more complicated situation, it'd be an institutional buyer, so perhaps they go to Gobi or some other system to do the selection from an institutional point of view. So you still do the purchase, but then it has to go into the platform reader, so it needs to go into their integrated library system or into their course management system or wherever the student's going to interact with this work, whether it's on a university campus or on a school campus. And at that point, you have the systems at the bottom there, learning management, integrated library management, and there's not another purchase window here because the institution has purchased the content, but now still there's the download or online reading experience, which leads to the happy reader. So it's a very visual kind of presentation. But the point is, a lot happens from when the publisher submits that manuscript to when the reader has a good, accessible reading experience. And all along the way, all of these various people, the 4 of us and plenty of other people, need to be interacting with these files to ensure performance and compliance on the formatting so that what we're all trying to accomplish, which is every book to every reader every day, actually happens at the end. And again, if one thing goes wrong, that just means everything went wrong and the reader doesn't get the right experience. And Trisha's going to tell you some cool stuff that happens at her institution on what goes on. So That's an ecosystem overview. There's actually like 648 little people you have to talk to make all this happen. I've just kind of represented in broad categories to let you know. Benetech is a nonprofit, and we work with the publishing community to help them get their workflows certified as fully accessible. So then the output from the Accessible Ready EPUB 3 goes into this flow on slide number 2, and the reader at the end has a good experience. Now I'm going to show you very quickly here, this is less than 2 minutes, this is an example of what it looks like for an accessible table. This is a real life example from a real book, and hopefully it's all going to work out fine, because it didn't work at all when we got here, so hopefully it's all going to work out fine now, and you're going to get, I think, a really clear understanding of what it's like to have an accessibility need, and when it's addressed correctly in a certified EPUB file. So here, all right. Not again, all right. That one, now we go. Okay.
Hello, my name is Charles Lapierre. I'm the technical lead of Born Accessible at Benetech and our GCA program. Here today I'm going to show you about table accessibility and what we're looking for when we crack open a book. So I'm in the program Sigil, and this is the rendered view of this table. So let's take a look and just see if what we see under the hood. All right, so first off, we see here's the table, and we also have a caption here, which is great. And this is what I'm looking for, TH for table header, and that scope equals quote col, which means this is a column header. So that's for my error in techniques and false and low readings, so that's great. And then below that, I'm looking at this table header for the row, scope equals row. And so that each one of these rows is a row header, and the other items are not row headers. These are just regular table data cells, which is great. Now, I'll switch over to Vital Source Bookshop, and I see this table rendered here, and I'm going to turn on VoiceOver and show you what happens as I move around the table. I'm expecting to hear that the table columns are announced as I move from column to column, and the table row information headers are announced from row to row as I move up and down through the cells. This is important because otherwise you would just hear like blank or check mark and you would have no idea what it refers to. So take a listen.
False high reading, blank, column 2 of 3. False low reading, check mark, column 3 of 3. False high reading, blank, column 2 of 3. Row 5 of 14 cuff too short, check mark. Row 6 of 14 cuff too narrow, check mark.
And as you heard, the false high reading, false low reading, those were announced as I moved between the different columns. And cuff too short, cuff too narrow, those were all announced with either check mark or uncheck mark, depending on where I was as I'm moving up and down the row. So that gives a lot more information than just hearing check mark, blank, check mark, blank.
So that's a super simple example of something which would be impossible to parse if you had any sort of print reading disability, blind, low vision, severe dyslexia. So that's one of the simpler things which is not typically considered in the publishing process, which must be considered in the accessible publishing process. So Benetech works with publishers around the world, where we have the largest library of accessible content, 800,000 titles, been doing this for 10 years, and the GCA program is the certification process for the publisher workflow that I mentioned earlier. So we are interested in talking to anybody and everybody about how we could help to teach you how to deal with these various issues. So that's it. 8 minutes.
So I'm going to talk about what we are doing and have done at the University of Minnesota Press to produce accessible EPUBs, and how that has changed in our process for production and editorial and the work we do with our authors. The part of the process that Michael showed you that I'm specifically going to address starts with the author submits a manuscript and goes up to us depositing a file in the digital warehouse. So just our path with accessibility at the University of Minnesota Press is that in 2011 we partnered with Bookshare, which is a Benetech product that serves the ebook content. This is really our first direct interaction with accessibility other than serving occasional files when accessibility offices called us. And then in 2013, we adopted a manuscript production workflow tool from a company called Scribe, and it's called the Well-Formed Document Workflow. And so this enabled us for the first time to produce EPUB files in-house rather than having to hire someone to produce them on our behalf. So this is when our staff begins their learning curve on what's required to structure EPUBs. And our production staff is starting to do this on our own. But we aren't really aware of what we need to do to make an accessible EPUB. It's a new concept to us, so we're still learning here. And in 2015, we got a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to build an open access publishing platform. That platform is called Manifold. And we then learned that we have to do this at the platform level as well as at the file level. But today I'm going to talk just about the file level because that's the work that we're still in the process of implementing. And that's what we're doing now in 2019. We're implementing a new production workflow. We're also assigning tasks to our authors. They need to participate with us in this process so that we can get the best metadata that readers need. So, for those of you that don't know, in the basic book production workflow, there's content creation, and that's the author, that's their writing. They are bringing together all the resources, the media, getting the permissions to use everything, and they're organizing the structure of their argument. They usually deliver us Word files, as well as then all the media files and the native file formats that they have for those, usually tables, often photographs. Really, we're not talking about media that you play. These are things that are going to go in a print book. And while an EPUB could serve interactive media, we're still not really dealing with that in the EPUB format. We're doing that more on the web. Things go through a peer review process. And then transmittal is the stage when it leaves the editor's desk and moves into production. So at transmittal is a stage for us where things have to start changing. And I'll get to that. And then it goes through the editorial design production process, and a file ends up at that data warehouse. So in order for us to implement an accessibility workflow, we need to change our in-house procedures. We need to revise our production guidelines and set the clear expectations. We need to give them lists of tasks. This is what you need to do, and this is what you need to deliver to us. And give them goals and timelines for doing these things so that we can still publish their books in the same or faster timeline that we do today. And then we also need new internal instructions and guidelines for our own staff. They need to know how to structure these files so that the example that Michael played would play in our files properly. And then the accessibility work can be embedded throughout the process. The author contributes some, our editors need to contribute some, and our production staff need to contribute some. A lot of this is in the form of metadata, and then it's in the production department where the file structure really comes into play. So, our action plan right now is that authors need to provide meaningful captions. They also need to provide alt text. They can supply their data sets and any data that informs the graphical elements so that it can be read by the screen readers. And so that's new data that they might not have provided to us in the past. They definitely never provided alt text to us in the past. And their captions sometimes were very much about who held the rights of that image rather than a description of the image itself. So we've got some training to do with every author we work with if they've never encountered this before. Now, university presses are used to training authors on how to write books. So this is a task that is familiar to us, but what we need to teach them is what's new to us. So we're learning and teaching simultaneously. Here it says press staff can create the long descriptions for things in-house. That's actually a point of contention within the press right now because we would want the editorial staff to write this. They are more familiar with the content in that book than the production department. But that's work and that's extra time. So the editorial staff would like the authors to create long descriptions when it's necessary to create them. Long descriptions might not be necessary because they might be contained within the context of the book itself to describe what's going on in that media element in the book or a table. So there's an evaluation process that has to happen with the editors to determine whether long descriptions are needed, and then if they're needed, there's a negotiation of who's going to write it. Is it going to be the author, or is it going to be the editorial staff? We're probably going to request that of the authors, and if they don't provide it, it will fall to the editorial staff because we need to produce this content. Another aspect of all of this, captions, alt text, data sets, and long descriptions, is that as a publisher, we want to copy edit that material. We want it to go through the process so it's the best representation, it's well stated, it's properly spelled. And so that adds to the copy edit task of a book and what the copy editors do. That also means that when we send a manuscript out to a copy editor, we need all this material to be already prepared. So this has to come with the manuscript from the author to us. It can't be provided later in the process if we're going to get it all copy edited and presented the way we believe it should be. All this accessibility content then becomes part of the production file set, and it becomes part of our standard procedure of producing an EPUB 3 in-house by our team. We do believe that there is quite a lot of extra time that all this will take, but there is value in this. We want to serve readers. As a university press, our mission is to disseminate scholarship to readers, and we believe that it's our duty then to provide this so that we can reach all readers regardless of their abilities. So this is the revised production workflow then, and in bold I have outlined the things that are new. So providing meaningful captions and alt text on the part of the author, reviewing and editing the accessibility metadata during the process, that the content of the book is logically structured and properly structured for accessibility metadata being included within the EPUB file. And then, both our print and electronic output then are anchored in accessible practices so that we are producing the best files for all of our formats that we possibly can. There's an added benefit, and this is something I talk to publishers about, because when we talk about return on investment in our books, you are able to use this same metadata for preservation purposes, because you've got all that context about what these media are within the book. And so if we reach a point where there's not the technology to read that media anymore, the context the metadata provides might still make it meaningful for a reader in 15 or 20 or 50 years from now using that file. Hopefully our files will scale, with the changes in technology, but frankly, someone would have to go back and do that transformative work to the file, and I don't know if that's realistic or not. So this accessibility content can actually help in preservation. It's also great discovery marketing data. It can, especially if you're dealing with open access and it's crawlable, that can help in your search results. But even if it's not open access, you get keywords out of it that you can use in your marketing activities. You get more description that you can use in your marketing activities. All of this is just richer content that contributes all the way through our process. And now we move on to the platform.
Thanks, Michael and Susan. And so prior to working as a product owner with the technology teams at EBSCO and specifically with books, I worked alongside and managed the actual production teams that ingest all of the ebook files. So I have pretty extensive firsthand knowledge of the content. And so while EBSCO is committed to and really needs to support accessibility from a platform standpoint, we also have to think about the downloaded files that we're passing to our customers and our users. And really it all starts with the publisher is delivering us. So I'm focusing on an actual review of EPUBs. So, and I'm sticking to my script, otherwise I will definitely take too much time away from Trisha. So the following slides we're going to see are a sample of 80 EPUBs expected to have some level of accessibility. We looked to our 2017 publisher survey to identify the files. The survey went out to about 200 publishers. 69% of them responded that they create EPUB, and a portion of that 69% told us that they were committed to accessibility workflows within the next 12 months. So this was back in 2017. So doing the math, around 2018, we would have expected to be seeing some of those come in. So the sample set that I'll be reviewing represents 40 publishers from that group. The titles span genre, subject, and language, and the publishers will remain anonymous, but we'll be reaching out to them and working with them to sort of give an overview of what we found in our investigation. Okay, so targeting front list, we ran each file through the DAISY Consortium's ACE checker and collected scores from the results for these 5 areas. They are WCAG 2.0 levels A and AA, navigation, images, and specifically meaningful alt text, that meaningful alt text was present, and whether or not the files contained documented accessibility metadata within the EPUB. The review didn't extend to ONIX or other bibliographic metadata. And so this was a super simple pass-fail investigation that we did. The passing criteria are expressed by the check marks here, and I'll be talking a little bit about these as we go. Okay, so looking at the first 3 areas, WCAG levels A and AA in navigation, it's great to see that passing rates are hovering at around 50%. We take this as a really good indicator that publishers are actively growing their accessible footprint. And Susan certainly is, her institution is on the forefront, and really it's such a great model that you guys are doing. And I mentioned that this review is sort of an oversimplified pass-fail. We didn't get as granular as checking the semantic information that the ACE report reveals, where manual follow-up is needed. So for example, let's see, am I on the right slide still? Yeah. So for example, a color contrast that's technically outside the standard, but is so close that it's acceptable to low vision users might be allowed a passing grade. In the WCAG areas, missing language codes, color contrast, and font weight were probably the most common of the serious violations that we saw. And where some violations could result in a pass in this very simple investigation, there are cases where an ACE pass leaves room for improvement. So for example, an EPUB with navigation structured perfectly for the web may not be perfect for the downloaded file. We have a colleague who is blind and works with us to test and demonstrate how vision impaired users interact with ebooks. And he noted with regard to this and the difference between navigating online and a downloaded file, that an ebook reader doesn't use or can't use the same keyboard shortcuts that you can use online. So there are many sort of variations of how assistive technology interacts both online and in the downloaded file. And these are the things that have to be really sort of vetted and go through that iterative process that this panel is really meant to represent. Okay, so moving along to images and metadata. This tells a little bit of a different story. The results were pretty poor. Granted, it was only 80 EPUBs, but again, it was 80 EPUBs from publishers who are committed to accessibility. So this really was quite startling. So we know that accessibility metadata is widely underutilized, but we were really surprised to see that only 4 of the files included meaningful alt tags for describing the images. So in fact, of those 80 files, only 2 passed all of the categories, right? Think about the egg, and not dropping that egg on the floor. So 78 eggs are smashed on the floor, basically. Okay, so just to quickly kind of spotlight image and alt text for images. So 78 of those the results from the ACE checker, and I'm sorry I don't have a screenshot, I probably should have provided that. Literally had not applicable, the not applicable was either there in the results, or it was image, or it was IMG, you know, so you know that there's an image here, but you literally have no idea what the image is of. Now maybe there's a caption, or maybe there's a file name associated with the image. But that doesn't necessarily correlate to the actual image itself and the content within it. So here's a very simple description that I wrote. And probably one of the editors would do a better job. But you know, if a screen reader were reading this, you know, Harriet Tubman seated portrait, right arm draped, blah, 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 you get a better idea of what the image is. I actually pulled that from the Library of Congress website. I guess it's some fairly new image that was found of Harriet Tubman. And it has a caption that talks about more of the provenance of the image, but it actually didn't have any descriptive alt text, which I thought was interesting. I think the Library of Congress tends to do pretty well usually. Anyway, so moving on to accessibility. You know, vast majority, no accessibility metadata was found within the file. And so, you know, really, if you're incorporating all of this, you know, production processes and people and doing the best you can to include accessibility features within your file, and you're not including the metadata, again, it's the egg dropping on the floor, because that is so important to downstream partners, people, systems that are relying on that, you know, to tell the distribution channels and the platforms, and ultimately the librarians, and Trisha will speak to this, what's included, and you know, discoverability, and it's really leaving a lot on the floor if this isn't included. And so there are so many resources out there. We do have some resources at the end of this presentation. But anyway, I'll just end with that, and just to say that, you know, I feel eventually accessibility formatting will be as commonplace as listing citations and setting margins. Let's try to get there faster than eventually. Let's all roll up our sleeves a little higher to engage in the process and with each other, to move beyond baseline requirements that check a box and get into the realm of truly usable ebook content that provides a meaningful and enjoyable experience for everyone. The investments really do benefit everybody along the chain. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to take the viewpoint that everyone has shared and kind of go up to a little bit of a higher level and share some of the work that we've been doing at Southern New Hampshire University in terms of accessibility. And I'm hoping that some of the information that I share you'll be able to take back, librarians to your institutions and our publisher friends to take back to your companies and get an idea of how this impacts the library and our users. So for anyone that doesn't know Southern New Hampshire University, we are located in Manchester, New Hampshire. We have a traditional on-campus student population of about 3,500 undergraduates, graduates, and doctoral students. Probably what you've more heard about is our online institution, which is about 230,000 online students, over 200 programs. So that's where I primarily spend my time working with our global campus. But in terms of what the library's been doing with accessibility, so we've really been working in this realm since 2016. Actually, when I came into the room, Michael was asking me, so how did you get into this work? And well, as many librarians can probably relate to, I was sitting on the reference desk and had an online student call that was low vision or blind and using a screen reader and just having a really difficult time navigating through our library website and then navigating through the databases and getting the information that they needed for their courseware, their courses. So in order to understand a little bit more about that experience and what the barriers were that the student was experiencing, we've done a lot to understand specifically how we need to review and continually remediate our library website. So we use SpringShare. They have a lot of nice accessibility features already built in, but we need to pay special attention to the content that we're creating as well. So if any of you are creating library guides, FAQs if you're using the SpringShare system, but really any content that you have needs to be accessible to all of your students. So we use something called Site Improve to work on that, our library systems team. We also do a whole bunch of training for all of our staff, so anyone that's creating content. Something new that we've been experiencing and working with, I mentioned I work with our global campus, so our online division. I work very closely with our instructional designers that are actually creating the curriculum. And so at the point of which that they are assessing library resources to put into the courses as course materials, I think this is a trend that I'm sure a lot of you are engaged with, or at least have heard about, that they're thinking about accessibility. So if they come across an EPUB or a PDF that has like an accessible table, like Michael was showing, then we're actually going to the vendor and going to our publishers and saying, hey, look, like our students can't get access to this if they're using some of their assistive technologies. How can you help us provide, first of all, fix the copy that's in the database platform, right? Because that would be the most equitable experience for all of our users. But if they are unable or unwilling to do that work, then we take on that remediation in-house at the university and then publish it to our learning object repository in Brightspace. So what the student experience would be, if you can imagine a link to an ebook or an article right underneath, if there have been remediations that we've had to do, then that accessible copy is right there for the student. And so it allows them to access it at their point of need. They don't even have to go through our online accessibility center or the disability center to self-disclose and say, hey, I need this format. So it's something that we're really excited about and been doing for a couple months. We're also working on an escalation pathway and partnering with our general counsel. So in the times where we come across I'll just say difficulties in that process. How can we let our partners know that it is a partnership, at the same time we are on the hook and we need to give our students the experience that they deserve. So how that we do that is through an electronic and information technology addendum. How many of you know of EITs? Show of hands. Oh, wow, I was not expecting this. Okay, that's good though, because I'm gonna tell you. So an electronic and information accessibility addendum is something that we've had for 2 years. And so you can see a screenshot of the kind of the first page of what an EIT looks like. And so it's part of our contracting process with our vendors, that it basically sets out the different accessibility standards that my colleagues have talked about. So the WCAG AA and single and AA things, it's section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So in terms of, that's looking both at our vendor platforms and documents. So if you're not aware, about I think a year ago, they passed a new part of 508, and that also is adhered to documents as well. So we talk about in this EIT basically setting out expectations of if we need to ask for remediation, how that will go, how the vendor is going to help us and cooperate with us, timelines. As you can imagine, when we make those requests, it can take quite a bit of time. And then there's also a really important section, and if anyone wants to see this, I'm happy to share it later, but it also says that if the vendor is not able to provide the copy that we need, that the university can make that remediation. So this is really an important document to have, that when you come across these needs and having to address them on your own, if, like I said, you aren't getting a lot of help from your partners, having that language and having set that expectation is really important. Of course, we do have copyright and fair use, so if you don't have an EIT in place with a specific vendor and you're coming across these issues, you can still work with your general counsel and folks to really move that dial forward. So how does that specifically impact our learners? Well, of course it does in the research process. We really need to strive toward that equitable experience, so students don't even have to contact the library and say, I can't even get onto the database platform, I can't understand what the results are, I have no idea where the full text of this document might be. And that becomes even more important when library resources are being used as course materials. So I can see we're almost at time here. Hurry up a little bit. Anything that you see for ebooks with DRM-free, EPUB, or HTML, those are really the best options. So when you're evaluating any new products, you want to make sure that you're looking at that, and any of your students that are using assistive technologies should have a better experience with those formats. So really make sure that you read the VPATs. This is where the vendors can tell you how they meet those specific WCAG standards, both in the platform and in for documents. Some universities are able to test those actual VPATs as well, because sometimes it doesn't quite match up with what you've read and then what the user experience ends up being. So it's really important to test your platforms, get to know the assistive technologies that your students are using, and really sit down and have an idea of what that experience is like for them. So if you have to go back and advocate for them, then you can do that, and you can really understand the barriers that they're facing. So if you, in these conversations, again, if you notice that your vendors have these types of features, they have these options, and more importantly, that they have a commitment to accessibility and they really mean that, and they understand the law, and they understand the barriers that students face, then that cooperative partnership is going to get you very far. Okay, so I think I have 2 more minutes. So just some general tips for both groups here. So librarians, you don't have to do this alone. I remember feeling very isolated, when our students, told us that they couldn't access things, and that can't be right. Like, how is that happening? And so I spent a lot of time reading what other universities were doing. The University of Michigan, I learned a lot, so if there's anyone from University of Michigan here, I've learned a lot from them. But you also really need to partner with the people that you have on your campuses as well. You have, or should have, offices of disability services, and your IT partners as well should know some of this. So find those people and make friends with them. Also, work with your general counsel in your procurement offices on developing an EIT. So I can't stress enough how important having those agreements in place are. It really gives you a leg up in dealing with some of these concerns. And build in accessibility to your workflows, both for purchasing and your own content creation, if you're doing that in your library. Test, retest, and experience, again, those platforms and resources from a user's perspective. It's easy to kind of say, oh yeah, but they're 508 compliant, we've looked at their VPAT, everything looks good. But until you actually experience that using this assistive technology, it's very eye-opening if you haven't done that. And build strong relationships with your vendors. This is a cooperative process. I know that many of our vendors, at least when I've reached out and worked with them, this is can be a new concept for them. So don't be afraid to push on it, but at the same time recognize that it does take some time investment and understanding on their part. So our vendor partners, the WCAG guidelines have existed for 30 years. So when you tell us that you're 508 compliant and ADA, don't bristle when we ask these questions, because we really just need to provide this information for our students and our users. We're both in that experience together. So if you don't have people that understand some of these issues, or if you don't have partnerships with other companies that do a lot of remediation work, start looking for that. Get help to retrofit your systems and your publishing workflows. So if you address any new content that's coming in, and it's more inaccessible, as some of my colleagues have said, then we don't have to go back and spend the ridiculous amounts of time that it takes to fix like tables, things that Michael was showing. So be ready to help us and understand our needs, and really put usability and accessibility at the forefront of your development. That's going to make higher quality content and the experience for everyone. So I see we're at time, so we can do this together. And as Jeanne said, we have a slide here with all types of tools and resources that we've used. So hopefully you all will find that helpful. And that's it. Thank you.
Please go back to the tools slot. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Should I go up here or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of general question, how's it going? Like, are there certain types of publishers that are doing well? It sounds like University of Minnesota is doing very well.
We just started, so
Okay.
we're going forward.
It sounds like University of Michigan.
They're great.
And I don't know, like medical, or we seem to be focused on academic in this discussion.
Right, so as it is Benetech's responsibility to help the publishing community do the more accessible and stop dropping all those 78 eggs and those other things, we find it comes down to two pieces. The first piece is, as is often the case in our various industries, will from above. So if the associate director, assistant, or the director, University of Michigan and University of Minnesota both have excellent people in those positions, then it's just, once that piece is done, yes, we have to do it. Some people have to do it because council said so. Some people have to do it because they're being sued. Some people, whatever the reason. But once you get that part done, then it comes down to the workflow issue. And the costs to get certified are very modest in the grand scheme of things, but you need to make changes in your workflow, because traditionally, when you're doing print books, you don't think about describing the picture that's in the print book. People just look at the picture, right? So a lot of these things have changed. And there have been regulations and rules and guidelines for 30 years, but it's really amped up. WCAG AA is much more significant. The change in 508 compliance, which now requires, which is documents, which is download, one of the number one problems is navigation. On the web, you're used to kind of navigating all over the place. Once you download, that method of navigation is not valid. So now you have to think about, did I describe my table of contents as a table of contents? And does my table of contents actually serve to links to the places in the book, which again, in the print world, you don't think about. So the publishing community has been very gracious. Some are moving more quickly than others. It's a fait accompli, to be honest about it. It's already happening, you know, and it's going on, and more student users are demanding it, more and more policy and legislation being passed. Things like many universities are saying everybody needs to have their materials on the first day of class. Well, if I have to go through remediation, I'm not available on the first day of class. It might be the 10th of October because she had to call the publisher, who had to call their vendor, who had to call, and now, you know, I've missed 2 quizzes and I'm out. So you're staring at a failed student experience, which is bad, perhaps a lawsuit, which is worse. So there have been some resistance in the publishing community, but overall, they've been very gracious. And it doesn't make any difference. We're in conversations with, you know, Springer Nature, Pierce, you know, just about everybody. When I say we, I mean me, because we're a charity, so it's not like I have a big team or anything. So the more the challenge is operational. The publishing community wants to self-certify, which is a good step, but somebody else's review is a better step.
I'll just put some time around this. For us to make an EPUB 3 that's fully accessible, and this is just producing the file, presuming you have all the content, it goes from a 1 to 2 hour process to a 7 to 8 hour process right now for us, which is, you know, significant. But we're right now doing it scattershot through our list. My goal is that every single book we publish goes through the same process, but we're starting from where we are and we're getting the metadata as we can, and we will be, every book we publish within, I don't know, maybe a year, 18 months. We're a little ways
Write
away.
it down.
Yeah. Well, it's a goal I've set for us. We'll see if we meet it. But, you know, that's real time. And it's worth the investment, but it's still real time.
When you do the one-off remediations, it takes longer.
Right.
So it seems like, oh, that's a great increase, or a huge increase. Well, doing it the other way is much worse.
Can I just add more of a question than a comment? Do you see, Susan, do you envision that as you invest the time, that it will eventually become more efficient, and then that 7 to 8 hours, like, is that, are you thinking along those terms yet, or is it too soon to know that?
Well, I hope it goes down. You know, a lot of our process gets faster, or, you know, our workflow tool partner Scribe, sometimes they build things that make things go faster for us. So maybe that will happen. It's going to take a while before that goes down. And even if it does, maybe it goes down to 5 to 6 hours. I mean, structuring the file and getting the metadata in there properly just takes time.
I was just interested to ask about open access, whether the Plan S has a requirement for accessibility or if they've ignored it. And if they haven't ignored it, how on earth is anyone supposed to pay for this if you're taking your money out of the back end of the process here? This seems incredibly important, very expensive. And I just wondered, under the open access mandate, who the funders expect will pay for this, if any of you know.
I don't know if Plan S has accessibility requirements. We get so focused on open access as a thing in and of itself. That's a good question, but we're going to do it anyway.
It's going to be a challenge.
It's already a challenge.
Does anybody know in the room, does anybody know if Plan S has an accessibility requirement?
I know they've got a lot of extra metadata requirements and tagging and so on. I don't remember accessibility being in that.
Sure.
But I suspect it would be. But it's just, money's got to come from somewhere.
It does.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we're good over time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.